Welcome to the special session of Lloyds on InsurTech as part of the special programming of Lloyds at RIMS 2021. My name is Enya. I'm the Regional Director and Practice Leader in Risk Management at Lloyds US. Lloyds has been a leader in innovation, and today we have the great pleasure of having the Lloyds team of innovation present to you some of the success of InsurTech, as well as the current innovation activities at Lloyds, featuring Ed Gaze, Senior Manager, Innovation Lab at Lloyds, Trevor Maynard, Head of Innovation at Lloyds, and Femi Williams, Associate, also part of the Lab Innovation at Lloyds. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. To help us better understand you, we would like to get a sense of who you are. So take a quick moment to answer the polling question we just posted. Secondly, we strongly encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. Rather than asking questions in the chat box, we ask you to please use the Q&A function instead to help us stay organized. And lastly, our session is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube channel. So please share with any colleagues who are unable to join us. Without further ado, please welcome Femi.
Awesome, thank you, Enya. Hi everyone, my name is Femi and I work alongside Ed Gaze and Trevor Maynard as part of the innovation team. And yeah, although we are one team, we all have different functions, and Ed and Trevor are going to go through how that kind of works with the different functions. So Ed mainly works on the Lloyds Lab side of things, and Trevor is the head of innovation, so kind of covers both sides. So the structure of today is Trevor will give a 10-minute presentation about innovation at Lloyds when it comes to thought leadership, future minds, and the PIF. And then that will be followed by Ed giving a short 10-minute presentation on the Lloyds Lab. After that, we'll kind of go into more wider questions about innovation and the future of it in Lloyds, and then open for Q&A. I do encourage you, just like Enya said, to kind of write your questions as we go along, because even though we have questions prepared, we're happy to kind of take questions as they come through. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Trevor to present on innovation at Lloyds.
Thank you very much, Femi, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So we think of it as a kind of Lloyds Innovation Toolkit, and we're going to be talking about some of those today. So we've got the Product Innovation Facility, we've got the Lloyds Lab, which Ed will cover. We've got the thought leadership, which we call action leadership, because we're trying to encourage people to act differently, reading our thoughts. We have the Future Minds program, which I will explain. And we also have a new thought leadership brand called Future Set, which we will not cover today, but that's definitely something to check out on lloyds.com as well. So if I talk first about the Product Innovation Facility, this was created in June 2019, and it brings together 27 syndicates who are working together to drive innovation. They came together in September 2019 to launch the first product, which was a hotel profit protection policy. And this really set out how the PIF would work, because one of the managing agents came forward, they are the insurers at Lloyds, they came forward with this product that they had developed, and they asked the other facility members, who wants to support this, who's interested, and 4 or 5 of them put their hands up, and that enabled them to take the line size that they could offer from sort of $5 million up to about $30 million, and that was what the client wanted. So it's a way of mutualizing that innovation and offering lines and that sort of things that the customer needs. January 2020, another product was launched called Coin Cover, which is a cryptocurrency wallet protection cover, and similar method there, one managing agent led and others followed. So in February 2020, we brought together chief underwriting officers to talk about the strategy of the PIF. And actually, we've just done that again in 21. And that was very exciting and really led us to, in June 2020, to announce this new innovation class, Innovation ICX at Lloyds, which allows for 2% of their business as usual premium on top of the BAU to be used for innovation experiments, which is around about £670 million, so not an insignificant amount, and really trying to stimulate that innovation. September 2020 saw another new product from Parametrics, and I'm going to talk about that later. And then in summer 2020, we launched the Future Minds program, which I will also talk about. So, firstly, just to say, we've published lots of different reports. So over the years, I think we've got about 80 or 90 if you want to go to lloyds.com and take a look. Just last year, we looked at the Chinese liability market. We looked at the implications of keeping below 2 degrees centigrade for climate change and how low carbon economy will affect different sectors. We published scenarios on cyber risk, on food security. But our main theme last year was around intangible assets. So last year, we started out with a paper called Protecting Intangible Assets, Preparing for a New Reality. And this gave an overview of what intangibles are and sort of started to talk about how to transfer those risks. And then we did some deep dives. One was on intellectual property. So we have the report there, Safeguarding Intellectual Property. And then another one in November was around reputation insurance and how you can protect your reputation. So why are we looking at this? Well, the types of risk that we need to think about are changing over time. And in 1975, the S&P 500 had around 17% of value was intangible, and around 83%, the bulk of it, was tangible assets like the value of property, machinery, that sort of thing. And that was insured, but intangibles generally weren't. And over time, this has changed very significantly. So you fast forward to 2015, and you find that we have just 16% of the S&P 500 value relates to those physical assets, and 84% are intangible. You look at the other side of the picture there, around about 90% of the physical assets are insured, as you well know, property covers, etc., but only about 5% of the intangibles are insured. And so that is a massive insurance gap that we've been exploring in the past year. So what do I mean by intangible assets? Well, you have structural capital, relational capital, and human capital. And the structural relates to things like intellectual property, proprietary software, even things like written procedures and processes, or your culture and norms. These are all assets that can make a great company great. Relational applies to things like reputation and brand, reputation with your customers, but also your suppliers and distributors. And then human capital is all about, the knowledge in the minds of your employees. And all of these can be thought of as assets that can be damaged. So let me just explain briefly in the next couple of slides how you can imagine those being damaged. So something like IP risks, you have an example top right there, online piracy of your digital product. So you've just had a media session where you talked about publishing your content and voiced happiness. There have been no leaks this time. And then an hour later, you find your content has been leaked. And this has been published on all torrent websites. And this can knock a huge amount of value off that proposition. And this has happened many times in the past to large producers. Moving on to the reputation risk side of things, you have the example top right of climate change denial. So say that there's a document that leaks that shows your organization emits twice as much carbon as previously reported. And at the same day, your CFO is quoted as saying there's no evidence of climate change. And then there's a survey on social media showing that the school leavers would hate to work at your organization. And all of these things come together to have a big reputational impact and can affect your share price and also the chances of recruiting people, etc. And then finally, on human capital, which is going to be our next big report published in about a month's time, I really like this example, on top right again, insufficient HR analytics. So if your HR analytics don't notice that there's a sudden spike in absences of people from a specific team that have a really key skill set, then you might suddenly find that you can't deliver to your clients what you were expecting. And then, of course, you get the reputation impacts as well. So the coupling up of technology, HR, analytics, and insurance could help mitigate that risk. So moving on, we have been working with the Future Minds program to think about intangibles. Last year and also just recently, we've been looking at human capital. This program brings together typically younger managing agents, so younger employees, so underwriters at those managing agents, although they don't have to be. And in fact, we have had some heads of department that have gone through this program. So managing agents, brokers, and also risk managers come together to ideate new products. So to, first of all, think about lots of examples of new products, for example, to do with human capital, which we did recently. And then you kind of boil it down into the most promising ones. So we ended up with 6 teams working for an 8-week program to come bring that initial idea through to a fully worked up proposal. And we've just had our Dragon's Den today, actually, to hear about what they've achieved on their 8-week program. And the 8 weeks kind of takes them through really thinking through, you know, what does the customer need? What's the regulation? How are you going to price it? How are you going to monitor aggregations? It really takes you through an innovation process. And that's our intention with that. So on the next slide, let me just end before I hand over to Ed with this example. So this really shows you, I think, what we're hoping to achieve with our work at Lloyds and how we have. So in 2018, my team published a report called Cloud Down, which was looking at the possibility of the cloud failing for a number of causes. And there's lots of ways the cloud could go down. You could be hacked by cyber, but you could also have something as simple as someone knocks a cup of coffee over the servers and that causes a problem. And these will have, you know, a range of effects, and the cloud will be down for a number of hours, or it could be a number of days. This will affect companies very significantly, particularly SMEs that are really dependent on the cloud. So we highlighted this and started, you know, raising the prospect of it as a risk. And this company called Parametrics read that report, and it turns out that they had been thinking of creating an insurance product to respond to this, a parametric product. So they contacted us and said, how can we reach out to the market? And it turns out that we have a form on Lloyds.com which gets them straight through to the product innovation facility. So they filled out that form and we forwarded it on to the underwriters of the facility. And they said, yeah, this is really interesting. We'd like to find out more. And they encouraged them to apply to the Lloyds Lab. And so they went through and they applied to the lab and they were successful. And they joined the lab in 2020 in April, and they went through the 10-week program, which Ed is going to explain to you. What was great, of course, was that this is right at the beginning of lockdown number 1 for us and you, and it shows that innovation has continued throughout 2020 and beyond. So, you know, we are still seeing innovation happening. It is alive and well at this time, at this difficult time. And by September 2020, they had launched a new product backed by Tokyo Marine Kiln, which is one of our managing agents, and a number of other product innovation facility members. And so we go all the way from thought leadership, action leadership, through to the new product being launched via the lab. For me, it's the perfect story. And with that, I'll hand over to Ed to talk about the lab.
Cool, thanks, Trevor. Good morning, folks over there. So Ed Gaze, I joined Lloyds 3 years ago to run the Lloyds Lab, and it's been a fascinating 3 years. What I'm going to do now is just give you a brief overview of the lab program, what it's all about, how it works, and I'll tell give you some examples of the teams we've had in the past couple of years. So the Lloyds Lab, the purpose of the Lloyds Lab is to find innovative new startups and other InsurTechs, find the best of them, bring them to the Lloyds market, partner them up with their mentors, partner them up with people from the insurance companies in the market, and do what we can to help test out their ideas or help them to maybe build new features, get data to see if their AI system is going to be useful for the Lloyds market, and do those kind of things, such that we can test these ideas out and see if there's something that would be beneficial for Lloyds, and ultimately culminate into commercial deals being done. So we start off, I've got not many words on my slides. This is a picture of the lab actually back when people used to actually meet face to face. Some people there innovating and working together. Sorry, excuse me, just some background noise. So the Lloyds Lab is still a physical room, but obviously no one's there anymore. So as Trevor said, we are now working virtually, and it's actually worked very well. But the thing about the lab is that we're bringing these people from across the world, particularly lots from the US. We're bringing them together with the underwriters, the claims teams, the risk engineers, etc. in the Lloyds market, and we're enabling them to experiment. We're helping break down barriers, and at the end of it, we've had a lot of commercial deals done. So we're really happy with how that's panned out. The magic behind the Lloyds Lab is essentially our mentors. So we've got about almost 60 people from the Lloyds market that are working actively with the new teams we've brought into the lab this month. And they're people who have been in the market on average, I'd say probably several years. They join and they mentor teams that they like the sound of, because it's something which is either personally interesting to them or professionally, and ideally both. And therefore they're really engaged. Like they're not kind of, no one twists their arm into being mentors. They really enjoy what they do, and as a result, we get some really good relationships being built. We get to really test these ideas out properly and make new things happen, which is pretty cool. So last year, COVID came along, obviously, and from a picture of people being in the lab space working together through to people all being on Zoom like we are now, how did that affect the lab? Actually, it didn't really affect the lab that much at all. We thought it would, but it didn't. We had some really, really good outcomes last year, which I'm going to talk about shortly. Some really good outcomes. And what we found was that because people were all on Zoom or all on Teams together, there was no kind of barrier of a few people being in a meeting room together and others having a poor experience of being on a conference call. It was like a level playing field. And it meant that the teams we had in from places like the West Coast of the US, they were just on a complete level playing field with those who were based in London. And I think it actually worked really, really well. I would say though, however, that you don't know what would have happened if people were face-to-face in the lab together. Maybe we'd have had some more things happen that just didn't happen because, those connections weren't made. So although I think we had a really fantastic year in 2020 and, some great successes, I do look forward to getting back to face-to-face so that we can start building a kind of a real ecosystem of startups in the building who can work together. This is a view of all the teams we've had in the lab to date. We start our next cohort next week, so I haven't included them on, but there's some really cool stuff coming through, which we can talk about in a bit. But you can see there's a domination of the UK and US here. We do try to get teams from around the world, and we are open to anyone in the world. But it's just, there's so much innovation in InsurTech going on in the UK and US. It just kind of happens that we end up with so many people joining us from those areas. Perhaps there's some logos there you recognize. I'm not going to bore you by talking about every single one here, but I'm going to give you a snapshot of some of them in a second. So those are all the past teams we had in. As I said, next week we've got a new cohort joining, and they are joining to work on these 4 themes. So climate change, it's COP26 in Glasgow, UK this year. And we really want to do a theme on climate change, and that's actually started off really, really, really well. So we've got a team looking at forestry, agri kind of stuff. We've got a team called Carbon Chain who are looking at the carbon footprint of ships, and also satellite data coming in from another who are predicting kind of 50, 100-year flood events. So we've got climate change stuff, we've got data and models, which is a theme we always have because there's always new sources of data, new ways of modeling data. We've got a team coming in to help cleanse property data. That's going to be a really interesting theme. Claims, we're working with the Future at Lloyds, and we're trying to bring in new claim solutions to help the Future at Lloyds complete its blueprint. And then finally, geopolitics, and that's a theme which is quite a difficult one. But we've got two companies in. One is Verisk Maplecroft, another one is a company called Moonshot, who are using like online data and stuff to and analysts data to help us understand geopolitical risk, like risk of local disruption, and that could impact the supply chain, things like that. On top of all that, we have something called Wildcard, and we've actually got a team that's doing something really fascinating with IVF treatments, which is not the kind of thing we normally expect to have at Lloyds, but it's actually got a lot of support in the market, and it's there to help couples who are trying to have babies with IVF, who are just completely uncertain about how many cycles they're going to have to go through. And it's a way of creating a new insurance product to help them get a bit more certainty about the costs. Okay, so just some brief overview of some of the teams we've had in. First of all, we've got Parcel. These guys are in the first cohort of the lab. You may have heard of them because they've launched the Global Health Risk Facility, and they're going to be insuring the COVID vaccine as it goes to low and middle income countries around the world. So they basically designed and made their own IoT sensor, and that goes in the shipment with the goods and will flag up if the vaccines have been too hot or too cold on journey. So these are kind of like the star of the Lloyds Lab show because they've done so many good things since being in the lab. Parametrics, Trevor talked about these, so I'm not going to go over them again, but they are another great cohort, great team we had in the cohort last year. Cinespace, really like working with Cine. They use satellite data to understand movement in lambs, the subsidence, to a resolution of 1 millimeter. And so what they were doing in the lab is they were looking at dam walls, and they've got lots of historic data. So what we were doing is finding dams that had collapsed, looking at the data on those dams and seeing at what point it was obvious that there was something wrong, and seeing if therefore we could kind of create some sort of solution for risk managers to understand the portfolio of things they're insuring. Is there a risk that this dam or this pipeline is about to fail? And if so, can we do something to prevent that before it actually happens, obviously? I was talking to them about a week or two ago about Florida, Piney Point, and how they were looking at the data on that, and they could really pinpoint where that leak happened, and that there there's a lot of other dams in the area, and they were looking at those and trying to see, okay, what's the chances of this happening again nearby very soon. So really fascinating stuff with Cinespace. Optilytics, these guys joined us last year, and they have now done a deal with the Lloyds Corporation and also with one of the managing agents in the market. Their solution is being used to help collate catastrophe data, and they're basically saving 13,000 man hours of manual work each year through their solution. So kind of like direct benefit we can see from that team being in the lab last year. And finally, Hazard Hub, these guys are from the US. They're a great bunch. They give you something 900 and something different data points for $1 on US property. And their data's great. They're real experts in wildfire. But then also, this is a completely different example, which is where they're showing their kind of quality of their data when it comes to shores. So the property on the left you can see is very close to a high-rise shore, but then it's 5 miles from a low-rise shore and almost 7 miles from the beach. And it's kind of, this is the kind of context they think a lot of their competitors can't give. It's like, they're not just saying it's this 115 feet from water, they're saying what kind of water it is and things like that. So kind of really high quality data. And it's like, as I said, almost 1,000 data points for $1, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so I've rabbited on about a bunch of things and a bunch of teams. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand back to Femi to continue the discussion.
Cool, awesome. Okay, so we'll go into questions. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we can kind of accommodate for that as we go along. So the first question, and I'll just ask it in one sentence, in one question, but it's basically, what does the future of innovation look like for the lab or the other side of the innovation team? And also, how do you personally see the future of innovation? So I'll start with Trevor.
Sure. Well, for the perspective of the action leadership work, our next big theme is geopolitics. And you may have noticed, as Ed said, that is also in the lab. And there's that, obviously that's not an accident. We think that COVID's had an impact on the geopolitical landscape, and there are other trends as well, like climate change and cyber, that are affecting it. So we are exploring how we can help our clients manage and transfer those risks. So that'll be one of our big areas for the coming year. And then also the human capital report is about to be published. One thing that's pretty exciting there is that we're going to run a kind of wargaming exercise where we take a scenario and we see how it would affect a hypothetical company. We're going to invite risk managers along to that to sort of see how that would work, how that would affect the company, and then a kind of groundhog day. So then if you had insurance, how would it then look? And obviously we expect to show that with appropriate insurance, then they'll be very much better off. So that's quite fun. I'll pause there and let Ed answer the question about the lab, and then we can come back to the second half.
Yeah, perfect.
Sure. So I think the pandemic has obviously forced change on a lot of people, and a lot of people that, you know, I've heard so many people who didn't know what Zoom was a year ago, which, I mean, obviously I'm in innovation, so I did know what Zoom was, but I thought everyone would have known what Zoom was. And it's just a little thing like that people who were reluctant to do video calls at all. You know, I know senior people who would only want to do a conference call a year ago. They didn't want to do a video call, didn't really know how to use the equipment, kind of thing. But everyone's been forced to do this. And I think it's interesting because although using video conferencing is not particularly the pinnacle of innovation, it's getting people to try something new and realize that actually that thing that I just didn't want to ever try before because I thought it was a pain and not useful, it's actually really easy to do and actually really useful. So I think although, you know, the move to work from home and all that has not been like, you know, massively innovative in a way, I think it's opened people up to innovation and to change. And so I think once we've kind of start to get back to some normal life and, you know, we've got something other to talk about other than COVID cases and things like that, I think people will be a lot more receptive of innovative ideas. And so I think the only way is up for what we're doing in the lab, and we're quite excited about it.
Great.
Yeah,
and sorry, go on, Trevor.
Well, I was just going to say the second half of your question. In more generally, I think that things like the Internet of Things are just going to start really taking off. There's going to be so many sensors that we're already seeing the number growing really fast, and couple that with AI, you're going to get a really incredible view of the world's risks. But I think who owns those sensors? Often it's going to be our customers. So it's really important to do collaboration with those customers to try and explore the sensor outputs. And I think therefore it's going to be all about partnerships going forward. So partnerships with customers, partnerships with InsurTechs. And actually on Wednesday, we launched something called the FinTech Pledge for the insurers, which we've signed up to. And we did a report there which talks about how to do partnerships with particularly InsurTechs and kind of some of the mistakes that can be made and how to fix those. So I think partnerships coupled with technology is going to really be the future of innovation.
Yeah. And you know, you talk about IoT, and the kind of natural thing that kind of always think about after you talk about IoT is parametric insurance. And so we talked about some parametric insurance products in our respective talks, but I just keep on seeing so many more parametric things coming to us all the time. And I think it's great because it's got a strong product simplification angle, which is something we're really keen on at the moment. People can understand what they're going to get and how, you know, when they're going to get paid and things like that. And it makes the whole process so much easier and quicker. And you know, I think there'll be a lot more parametric insurance coming in the next few years.
Awesome, thanks. And actually, I want to revert back to something that you said, Ed, because it kind of leads on to the next question. You talk quite a lot about kind of Zoom and this idea that now this is like a massive kind of function of how we live, and that kind of move towards this new normal. And so, yeah, we've been living in the pandemic for over a year now, or living in this new normal. And so let's kind of expand and kind of, I guess the question is, how do you see the future of this hybrid world working when things go back to normal, or when, you know, everyone's back in the lab, and the same when it comes to innovation as a whole and the other side of the team? So maybe Ed, do you want to start, because you kind of spoke about Zoom and stuff?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess it's hard to know. My personal opinion is it's hard to know what we're going to be doing in a year's time, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, basically your viewpoint is different to when things are normal. You know what you're, you know, things that right now you think sound too scary to do or too difficult to do, you know, when the kind of lingering threat of COVID is gone, might be very different. So it's hard to really know, but I think it's definitely opened people's eyes up to the fact that they can function well at home and don't always need to be in the office. And that leads on to what is the purpose of the office then and stuff. And I've been involved with the future of the Underwriting Room work that's been going on at Lloyds, and there's been some amazing ideas come through. But like, I think the premise needs to be like, why would you go into the Lloyds building? Why'd you go in? It needs to be, you need to be there because you can't do something, or you get an experience that you wouldn't get online. And so, you know, a lot of what we've been, people's ideas that have been coming to the fore on that have been about how the Lloyds market can, you know, the building can change, how it can be more of an experience, how it can provide different services for people, and leverage the things that it does really well. So it's great for connections. So, you know, it's not so easy to network and stuff on Zoom. It's not so easy to build relationships. And, you know, sometimes you need to just get a few people together and thrash something out on a whiteboard. And so maybe the future of the Lloyds Underwriting Room is going to be a different look to what it is at the moment. Maybe there won't be boxes. Maybe, you know, maybe the Lloyds Lab will be on the ground floor. Who knows what will change? But I think the focus on it being, you go there because you get an experience, or you get things that you can't do on Zoom. And so, yeah, who knows what the new normal will look like, and how much will be in the office, how much will be at home. But I think one thing's for sure, it's going to be fascinating to see where we end up in 2 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd share that initial sentiment of I've got no idea. I think their personal views. I hope that we keep the balance between home and office. I think that there are strengths in both places, and so that's something I hope. I think that meetings will become more purposeful, and that we get together rather than just for habit, but for specific things, and we know why we're doing it. I think we won't lose the digital skills that Ed was talking about earlier. And, you know, I've tried a whole load of different ones throughout the year, Miro, Remo, as well as things like Zoom. But, you know, we're all publishers now. We're all using these new technologies in creative ways. And I think sometimes they're almost better than some of the face-to-face. So we need to find a way of retaining them, because they capture your discussions as you go in a digital way. So something like Miro is a flow, and as you fill it in, you retain for posterity all that information. So no more typing in of those sticky notes that we all had over the walls. You know, it's all done for you. So I think that we will retain that, hopefully, and we need to find a way to do that. And I think there'll be more and more automation. And then we probably need a new social contract there to make sure that that doesn't, you know, cause issues with employment and that sort of thing. So I think in the longer term, we definitely need to think through our relationship with technology as a species, if that's a big enough comment for you.
Yeah. And talking about technology, obviously, yeah, we work in innovation, and there's always this talk, or there's always this concept of disruption. Sorry about the train. And
Disrupting you.
I guess, can you hear it? I'm sure you guys can hear it. Sorry about that. Yeah. So you know, there's all this talk about disruption, especially in the space, and a lot of the time when it comes to InsurTech and this idea, it's this concept that, you know, InsurTechs are coming in to disrupt the insurance market, disrupt what we're doing. I just wanted to get your comments on that. Is it that we see the kind of emergence of InsurTechs as someone that are going to disrupt or displace what we currently see as the insurance market, or how will that kind of look in the future?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I don't really see what we do with the lab as being disruptive at all. I see it as like incremental improvements in very niche specific areas. Whether it's an improvement on an existing way of working or it's an improvement for businesses because they get a new product kind of thing. So we do new products and we do improving the current ways of working. But it's not like the lab, we don't really seek this kind of thing. It's not like we're going to kind of create a whole new business model for insurance and disrupt the way that our managing agents work in that sense. It's such a big, complex beast. What we want to do is we're looking at finding solutions that can just make the lives easier, make reduce overheads, reduce costs, underwrite better so we understand the risk better, things like that. So it's all about incremental improvements rather than kind of massive disruption. None of what we're doing is really trying to like disintermediate brokers or anything. That was one of the fears when I first joined the lab. People would talk about, I haven't really seen anything going on like that. It's actually, if anything, like there's been so much, so often we're in a call with the managing agents and the InsurTechs, and they want brokers in the room, and it's like, this is going to be so much better when we've got the broker perspective and stuff. So no, I don't really see it as disruptive.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the definition of disruption, because I was going to say we're disrupting ourselves. We're trying to bring the partnerships in, but Ed is right. If you read books on innovation, then disruption is something like the iPhone that throws away everything that went before it and radically changes the world. And then I think insurance is a highly regulated, highly complex sector, and what we are doing is modernizing it. And I think, I would personally say things like parametric products and coupling them with sensors and IoT, it's pretty exciting. Whether you call it disruption, it doesn't matter, but it's a pretty big leap forward for us, I think. And in that sense, I think it's quite major what's going on. So we're really trying to operate better and grow the market in the lab, and I think that's our objectives. And it's not so much about disrupting in a way that causes people concern. It's more about encouraging that culture change that Ed mentioned, to try and get people to try new things and see that there's a better way of doing things.
Perfect. And I think that's quite important because it kind of leads on to kind of the next, or my final question, because if it's not about disruption, it's more about collaboration, and that's kind of how we work. So how do people get involved with, the lab, the PIF, Future Minds? What are the kind of next steps?
From a PIF perspective, there's the form online. So you can go to Lloyds.com and you Google product innovation facility, then that, if anyone's got any great ideas for new products, please let us know, fill in that form, and we'll make sure the underwriters hear about it. And then I'll let Ed talk about the lab side of things.
Yeah, so if you're a managing agent and you want to meet the teams, you want to mentor the teams, let me know. LloydsLab.com has got details on all the teams that we've got in the lab, past and present. If you're not from a managing agent, you're a broker or otherwise interested party, then just get in contact with us. We'd be really happy to set up an intro and give you more information about what they're up to. Be delighted to do that.
Great, thanks, guys. We also have a question here. Kevin has asked, do you see great benefits or great risks when quantum computing exists?
Yeah, what a great question. Obviously, the answer is both, as it so often always is with these new technologies. I think, quantum computing is going to be, actually, what's interesting with that is I think it ironically takes us back to the mainframe days. So, if you go back to computing in the 70s, there were a small number of mainframes in the world. And then the big disruption of that was when we all had our personal computers in the 80s and beyond. I think quantum computing takes you back to that kind of mainframe idea where there'll be a small number of quantum computers in the world and you buy time on those computers. So there's a sort of radical way, a different way of thinking about engaging with them. But, you know, I mean, some of the things you can do there are like exploring new chemicals and pharmaceuticals and that sort of thing could be game changing in terms of designing new drugs for people, or planning out more efficient routes for things. So carbon footprint management, you know, there's lots of things you can do with quantum computing that you simply can't do in real time with normal computers. It would take you until the end of the universe to solve the problem, and yet a quantum computer can do it. Obviously, the downsides are things like breaking encryption, and that could be massive. There are now groups trying to come up with post-quantum encryption, so to deal with that. But that is no doubt a big threat, you know. And I guess the question is, which comes first? Do we have the new protective technologies in time to deal with the issues of quantum? And for me, the biggest example, that the really nice one, is this idea, not nice, it's horrible actually. It's the idea that criminals are stealing data now to decrypt it later. So, you know, the idea that a quantum computer can break public key encryption, and so things that we think are safe and secure today will not be in 5-10 years time. So I think definitely there's a message there to cyber underwriters and also to companies, is to think about encryption and just to think that one through, I'd say. But in the main, I'd say it's the usual. Technology can bring benefits and risks, and I wouldn't want to stop it because I think the benefits could be huge, but we do need to think about the risks.
Thanks.
Well, I don't have anything to add to that. It was pretty comprehensive.
Okay, wasn't sure if you did. We actually did a spotlight event a couple months ago on quantum computing. I think you'll be able to find the resources on the lab website, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I think so. On the events page, I think you'll be able to find in the historic events, there should be a link to the presentation. It was really, really good, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's great. Just quickly, does anyone else have any more questions? And if not, we'll close out. I'll give it a second. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. It was really great to have this conversation and to, spread the good news about the innovation and what we do from, across the Atlantic. And thank you to Trevor and Ed for your understanding and for your presentations. And yeah, I think we'll close off there unless anyone has anything else to add.
Thanks, Femi.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Femi. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.